So looking forward to this. It's been an amazing series so far. Xero for Groups, the App Advantage, and here we are with the grandstand finish, the finale, as we talk about foreign exchange. So again, thank you so much for joining. Just to signpost you to the Q&A section in the Zoom toolbar. So please do fire through any and all questions that you have. We have the time set aside for Q&A at the back end of the webinar. The plan for today, I'm going to run through intros. We'll go and get into the discussion about foreign exchange from an app advantage with Xero perspective. We'll have time for Q&A, and then that'll be that. We will wrap up this 6-part webinar series. So I'll do my intro first. So my name's David Tucker. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Mayday, and I'm also the co-founder and CEO by virtue of that of CFO Techstack. I'm an accountant by training, so started my career at Deloitte, did my qualifications there, and then was twice a Xero using finance leader of multi-entity businesses. I've been an accounting tech entrepreneur for the last decade now. I was previously the founder of Chaser, the accounts receivable solution, and for the last nearly 3 years of building Mayday with my co-founder Griff and our rapidly growing and fantastic team. So to frame this series, we at Mayday, with the larger Xero users, the majority of our customers, like Carl, have in-house finance teams. Our mission is to mend month end, starting with specifically the needs of multi-entity businesses, intercompany recharges, cross-entity bank reconciliation, keeping intercompany loans in balance. Our most recent review on the Xero App Store is titled, Where Beautiful Accounting Software Meets Marvelous Multi-Entity Month End. And we've also broadened from that now into also, addressing pain points of single entity businesses, first up with intra-entity reallocations of costs and revenues between departments. And so we won Xero's Emerging App Partner of the Year award back in April last year. And off the back of that, did an absolutely sort of shamelessly titled webinar called Mayday, What is All the Fuss About, with a couple of our customers. And out of that, sort of hit upon, there were two sort of broader things that we were addressing, broader questions that we were solving for our customers. That around, is Xero still the right system for me? And if the answer to that is yes, for how long will that be the case? Indefinitely, or when will be the point that I outgrow it? And the nature of uncertainty is that when we don't know something, it leads us to act earlier. The move to ERP has been horrible and hectic, as one of our customers described it. It's punitively expensive, and all of that is before 58% of ERP implementations fail. So we have this idea of peace of mind, the peace of mind that you can scale successfully with Xero into your growth phase as a business and as a group. But it's the absence of precedent that really kind of causes issues. Too many businesses make the wrong decision in the absence of that precedent, that it is possible, it is advantageous, it is desirable to continue to scale with Xero. So we launched this Building an Enterprise Level System webinar series back in September last year. Got amazing feedback about that, 800 registrants, and off the back of that launched CFO Techstack, the mission of which is to really create the resource that I wish I'd had as a finance leader heading up a multi-entity Xero using business, to provide the content and community to address the unmet need, to close the awareness gap about what it is possible to do with Xero plus its ecosystem, to demystify and show what is possible, and ultimately to provide that missing precedent. We publish a fantastic weekly newsletter that gets rave reviews. We've got the Finance Leader Advisory Council as the representative body of finance leaders that use Xero. And watch this space for coming in September, Stacked, which is the in-person event, the equivalent of XeroCon for in-house finance leaders. Now, this series, it's all about being a group specifically. And it's framed against the backdrop of how can we be useful to our target customer. It's not about product marketing. It's not about building a best-in-class app stack. There's a reason that I'm not wearing a Mayday t-shirt, or that I'm very grateful to John for representing the Mayday colours in spirit with his top. It's about righting the misconception, but not overcorrecting. It's not about replacing one myth with another. There are times where it's right to move on from Xero, and ERP is the right thing. So we don't want to hide from that either. Xero is about doing beautiful business. This series is about how to be a gorgeous group. And what better segue from that into introducing my panel today. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Carl, by James, and by John. So Carl, I'll come to you first. Perhaps you could give a little intro about yourself.
Of course. Well, thank you for inviting me to the session. Really keen to see here and hear what everyone else has to say as well. I'm Carl. I'm the CFO at GENFLOW. GENFLOW essentially helps creators monetize their audience. Creators also being known as influencers. I've been working in or on tech sort of startup businesses for at least 10 years now. I've come across David many times in his past as well. And yeah, keen to be involved in today's session.
Amazing. Carl, brilliant to have you here. James, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Scobie. I work at a company called Airwallex, which is happy to be taking part. For those that don't know, Airwallex is a payments, FX, and financial platform. We support all sorts of businesses around the world with all things payments. My role, I've been at the business for the last coming up 3 years, and it's primarily working with the accountants across the UK and supporting clients that are looking to expand or even invest into the UK and are after all things payments and banking.
Amazing. Thanks so much, James. And John, finally, over to you.
Yeah, hi David. Thanks for having me on as off the back of those rave Xero reviews, which are highly alliterative. I'm not entirely sure if I can live up to that with my intro, but I work for a mid-sized firm based out of Manchester in the northwest of the UK. I now look after our tech strategy, but have previously worked in accounts and audit in a past life, if you like. And most of my work now is working with our clients, helping them to fix pain points and problems. More often than not using technology, but also sometimes around redesigning systems and processes to be more effective.
Amazing. Well, fantastic to be joined by all of you, and we've got such a rich opportunity to learn from you. So I'm really keen to dive into the webinar. Before we sort of charge ahead, I really want to make sure we're kind of framing the subject matter for today. So, like, first off, when we're talking about foreign exchange as a group of companies using Xero, what does that mean? And why is it so important? So, Carl, I'd love to kind of come to you first to understand what that means for you at GENFLOW and why it's so important, and then I'll come to John with your ability to talk across a cross section of clients.
Yeah, of course. So as a group, we've got many entities. We have 6 in total, which are across the world. We've got an entity in Dubai, an entity in Ireland and America. And obviously they have their own currencies that they translate in, which means when it comes to a group, we're having to use FX to get a GBP amount for our reporting internally and to the board as well. So FX plays a massive role there in terms of ensuring the financials are valued at a correct amount. We've obviously got the old assets that need to be valued at a correct spot rate at a certain date. So FX sort of runs through the whole business, and essentially some foreign exchange amounts can mean a profit or a loss in the bottom line at the end of the day.
Fascinating. Okay, yeah. So that really brings it to life. There's the, if I think about it, my own background as a CFO, right? There's the sort of, the retranslation, we could, spend loads of time talking about functional currencies, but we won't necessarily go down that route in the context of this webinar. But there's the accounting application, right, from a reporting perspective. But then there is the the practical manifestation, right, of okay, if I'm not on top of this, that could be the difference between a profit and loss each month. So amazing, Carl. Thanks for bringing that to life. John, over to you.
Yeah, cheers, David. I think from the kind of experiences we have with our clients, there's quite a few problems around managing foreign exchange and particularly branching out overseas. I guess the first one is the challenges around opening bank accounts. It's hard enough in the UK, let alone when you start to go over to Europe or the Far East or wherever it may be. and so that immediately brings its own delays and problems and administrative issues. Alongside that, of course, is once you've got those bank accounts set up, they're not always with the banks that you're using if you're in the UK. So you might bank with a high street bank here or one of the new fintechs, but then you've got to go with like Bank of Australia, for example, once you're in Australia, and then of course you've got that challenge around having two sets of logins. You've not got full visibility all the time of things. You've got 18 tabs open on Chrome to see all the accounts all at once and things. So they might sound like sort of relatively trifling problems, but those are challenges in themselves. And and then as Carl mentioned, the whole just holding FX balances, understanding what they translate to in terms of sterling balances or whatever is relevant, and really understanding your exposure are probably like some of the key strategic risks that groups have, particularly when you're dealing overseas. And just managing that exposure, managing how you do things like payments that we take for granted maybe in the UK. Those things all contribute to making operating overseas a little bit of a minefield and a challenge for people just to sort of get on top of.
Amazing. And this series is very much about being a group with Xero and the advantage you get from the app ecosystem. Before we get into the ecosystem side of things, really want to make sure we focus on Xero itself, what it does to natively that really helps from an FX perspective. Perhaps compared to a business that didn't use Xero, for example, compared to a group of businesses that does. So, like John, I'd love to come to you first on that. What is inherent to Xero that really that really helps from an FX perspective?
I think Xero immediately kind of solves some of the problems that I alluded to in terms of if you can get a bank feed, and you can generally get a bank feed for the vast majority of countries, assuming that you get it all in one place, and of course that's where the group structure will come into play, is that you do get that visibility of accounts, and Xero will provide live translation because they have a feed from xe.com, and so you've got that immediate visibility of not just the FX balance, but also the sterling equivalent balance if you're reporting in sterling, and it's not just across bank accounts, it's across all of your foreign currency exposure across the ledgers, so sales and purchases as well. And so you have that there in product. I guess where it becomes challenging, of course, is once you go multi-entity and you've got that multi-entity structure with more than one Xero subscription, is drawing that visibility out into something more central is becomes challenging again. And that's it. But if you compare that to say desktop softwares in the accounting space, you just don't have anywhere near the kind of capabilities that you would have with a cloud product, and it makes a huge difference, I think, just to managing expectations, and also just having stuff there available almost at the click of a button without having to send it off into a spreadsheet and do manual translations, etc.
Amazing. And then Carl, to come to you, if we look at your journey from a GENFLOW perspective, growing across different territories, expanding to 6 entities a group, what have been the sort of key growing pains that you faced when it comes to FX?
I guess to go with the banks, opening a bank account and not being a US resident, for an example, can be challenging. The banks always ask for KYC, which can be a bit time consuming to keep up to date and get from various investors, which can cause the bank to maybe limit your access, which can cause problems with paying bills and everything else. And then, if money's in the US account and you want to pay a dollar invoice, you tend to maybe pay from that account, even though it relates to a UK company expense. So there can be issues there where you've got a payment in a different bank account that relates to a different entity, and it's just reconciling those numbers was problematic in the early days, for sure.
Fascinating. And then John, like from your perspective, what are the recurring sort of pain points, growing pains that you see clients run into when it comes to FX?
I think the first one is it's just managing exposure. And again, Carl sort of alluded to that in terms of, you have a balance sitting in a dollar account, and you just make a payment out of that, irrespective of what entity it kind of relates to, because that makes sense, right? It's the logical thing to do. And then that if it's relating to a group entity and you don't have a product like Mayday, I'll get my first plug in there for you, David. Is that managing that is challenging, right? Because you've got a set of transactions in one set of accounts which need to be then moved around to another set of accounts, and you've got to deal with the FX translation issues as well. So all of it does create admin, which feels a little bit unnecessary, and it's a little bit unwieldy. I think the other side of FX again is that quite often, certainly in our experience, what tends to happen is that if you don't have that kind of live feed data, and you're not really on top of what your exposure is, you can suddenly be coming to someone like us, and we might do monthly management accounts or quarterly management accounts. And Carl's probably experienced this with his internal team, is that you think you're making money, and then all of a sudden you do your translations and you've lost 20 grand, and it's like, well, how the hell do we do that? That wasn't apparent beforehand. And so just having that kind of visibility there, so you can see it immediately, rather than it just being an adjustment that happens when you do management accounts, is so much better from a management perspective. And again, it just gives you a real indication of what your kind of exposures are, which again, I think people probably underestimate, even though we kind of expect, particularly in traditional countries like Europe and America, for example, that there's not that much volatility, but it can still make a big difference, particularly as you're a growing business, and especially if you get equity investment, which means that you're going to be investing in other places.
Amazing. And James, I'd love to bring you in terms of the customers you work with. What have you seen in terms of common growing pains they've run into?
Yeah, so I think Airwallex, it goes to market in a number of different ways. The most common one would be through what we call our web app. So banking software, clients are able to log on, create multi-currency accounts, manage treasury. So if you are investing or receiving investment in USD, you're able to, first of all, receive it via a local USD bank account. You can then convert it as you see fit. But touching on, I suppose, some of the pain points that we come across before clients are coming to us is, the bank account can be a really challenging thing to get. If you're a UK business expanding to Europe, you may need to have a local director. You may need to have an office or some sort of presence. And all of a sudden, you've got clients in Europe who are having to pay you in GBP into your local UK bank account. All of a sudden, you're not really having a proper presence in that market. So when we speak to clients that they're able to open up lots of different accounts, it really, I suppose, validates their presence. Even Mayday being able to expand into Australia, being able to have that local bank account, adds a lot of value to the actual operations. In terms of cost as well, Airwallex as a business started primarily as an FX business, so looking to solve the problem of SWIFT fees and the time it takes to send money internationally. All of a sudden, if you're using a specific platform built for purpose, costs are going to keep low, time is going to be a lot faster, and ultimately your suppliers and even employees, if you've got global payroll, are going to be a lot happier, I suppose.
Amazing. And then so back to you, Carl. I'd love to hear about what you've been able to do with Xero plus its ecosystem when it comes to FX at GENFLOW.
Obviously, we're now using Mayday as an example, which helps us sort of reconcile the transactions that might be in the wrong entity. We've also got intercompany recharges and intercompany loans that we need to look after and ensure we're looking after ourselves in terms of transfer pricing. So ensuring that is looked after within the Xero itself. I'm just trying to think. We are probably behind in terms of looking after sort of a group as a whole, using software to do the intercompany, the management accounts in terms of a group and an entity. We are slightly behind there. So that's something that we are looking into and exploring itself. And then otherwise, I'm just trying to So I think we're obviously using the various banks that have live bank feeds within Xero, which also helps in terms of timing everything else. And I've
That's great.
lost my track, but yeah, I think that's the main points I think that come to my mind anyway.
Amazing. And then John, like I'd love to kind of bring you in here. If you think about, like, you know, the huge range of clients that you've worked with, you know, the multi-entity ones who are dealing with, you know, different territories, different currencies, what are some of the success stories there?
I mean, I think. I mean, for us, we're always looking for ease. You know, that's what we're trying to do, because, you know, as soon as you go multi-country, multi-entity, you know, you've got a myriad of challenges, some of which we already touched on, and I'm sure you've touched on others, you know, in previous conversations. So, you know, where we've had lots of success has been, you know, around using products like Mayday, you know, in terms of just easing some of that administrative pain and making it a little bit easier to you know, do things like that group, you know, bank reconciliation, where you've got a, you know, transaction in one entity that should be in another, and being able to manage that really, really efficiently. Even if you've just got a UK group, you know, that in itself is a problem, irrespective of dealing with FX. I think Carl probably touched on pain point that we see a lot of, which is around reporting. You know, we see a lot of groups, you know, still relying on things like Excel. Sometimes, if they're a bit more sophisticated, they might be in Power BI or Tableau or something like that, and you know, trying to make sure that reporting happens quickly and promptly and stuff. And you know, there are a myriad of reporting apps, you know, in the ecosystem that will help you do that. Some of them, you know, handle FX in slightly different ways. So that's often one of the challenges, is they'll deal with group consolidations reasonably easily. But once you bring in an FX element, they slightly, you know, add some complexity to that in terms of the way that they handle FX rates and the currency exchanges. And so you do need to sort of, you know, be efficient of that in terms of just understanding what that means when you start producing your reports, particularly if they've got to go to investors, because you want to have a level of consistency there, and not have unexplained items that are coming out. I think you know, the other things that are helpful within the wider ecosystem is that, you know, it is localized as well. So you know, if you were to go to Australia, obviously, you know, home territory really for Xero, but there's a huge market there of things that are totally bespoke for that market. So, you know, payroll, for example, which again is a pain point, because if you're a UK business, you'll be all over UK payroll probably, whether you do it in-house or outsource it. But as soon as you go to Australia, you won't have a clue about things like super. You won't really understand what the various tax rates are and things like that. And it'll all be new. And so being able to manage that effectively, whether you do it in-house within the ecosystem, or outsource it, but still within the ecosystem, just eases the burden a little bit in terms of, you know, transition management, integration, etc. So I think those are probably some of the key things we look at. And you know, we're seeing more and more products come into the Xero ecosystem that do accommodate groups, complex structures, and things like that, just to, you know, because that's clearly a pain point. And as you said in the intro, David, you know, we know that a lot of businesses, you know, don't kind of bust the transaction limits, which are really the trigger point for having to move out of the Xero space into an ERP type area. But all that happens is they just add complexity in terms of structure or you know, types of transactions, and those can be generally accommodated within the ecosystem.
Amazing. And James, like, coming to you in terms of Xero using groups that you have as customers at Airwallex, like what are some of the stories there about what they've been able to achieve and the impact you've been able to deliver?
Yeah, so Australia is where Airwallex started. So we have a strong group of Xero users globally. I think what we're increasingly seeing across certainly our product is that, you know, every business is able to make an international payment or convert funds, whether it's using the existing bank or you know, other software out there. But ultimately, it's what comes before that is often becoming more important for finance teams, and especially larger Xero groups. So in terms of what we've been looking at, it's things like approvals, it's things like uploading invoices directly to Airwallex, and then also looking at things like different approval hierarchies. So if you're looking at your UK entity, you can easily toggle between your US entity or your Dubai entity. And all of a sudden, you've got the one software that you're using across multiple different entities. In terms of types of clients that we deal with, multi-entity groups around the world is really our bread and butter. But it also extends to startups that are looking to expand internationally. So there's a wide range of clients that we deal with that are sending money internationally, but it is more of the products like bill pay, being able to import invoices, picking up what's on the invoice, making sure you've got the right risk and controls to actually execute the payment and not get yourself into trouble later down the track.
Amazing. Amazing. And it's one of the case studies on the Mayday website, actually, Immutable, who are a shared kind of customer of ours. And I remember their story of how revolutionary the kind of the Airwallex spend cards were for them. But it's a really interesting kind of case study in the benefits of the broader ecosystem, right? It's not just about looking at isolated solutions, because they were able to spin up spend cards across the different territories they operated in. They had a US entity, so we're able to kind of create the spend card out there. And James, you know more about this than me, but I think it was they got a better level of like cashback on the US card, and so would use that to incur all as much of the kind of the US cost of the business as possible, so all of the software subscriptions they paid for. But that would then create the second order challenge of, well, I've got loads of bank feed items in Xero in my US entity that actually relate to different entities in the group. And so that created kind of second order headache for them that our Bragg product, bank reconciliation across the group, was able to solve for them. So I think like this has come out across this series, that it's not just about thinking about FX. It's not just thinking about kind of accounts payable or consolidation. It is the greater than sum of the parts results that you are able to generate by knitting Xero plus its ecosystem solutions together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to add to that, there is a really good story in using something like Airwallex to consolidate not only bank accounts around the world. John, you mentioned having lots of different passwords, lots of different accounts, not only to streamline payments coming into the business, but also being able to, as you said, use the spend cards, being able to issue them not only in one country, but in multiple regions, which, as you said, creates less headaches for the team at the end of the month when you're looking to reconcile it all together.
Amazing. Amazing. So look, there's a couple of questions that come through that I'm eager to dive upon. So there's one that John's already. John, you've already jumped on two, which is fantastic. So let me pose those to kind of James and Carl as well to see if they've got anything, and then can add in John's point. So got a question about what's the hardest geography you've experienced to open accounts in, and how did you manage it? Like Carl, be interested to hear your experience on that from a GENFLOW perspective.
Yeah, there's a couple. When we opened up in US. We obviously opened up with Silicon Valley Bank, which everyone does, and unfortunately, as we know, last year that all sort of went wrong and caused a long weekend for many accountants. I sort of used some of my peers to work out how we go about opening up a new bank account. Long story, we went to JP Morgan. Our turnover thresholds didn't meet their criteria, and a few other sort of high street banks in the US were very much the same. We went to sort of a new bank called Brex, which I found out from James that they sort of partner with sort of Airwallex themselves, and managed to open up a bank account there, even though we're UK residents and no one's out there. So we managed to get through the wave through a lot of hard work using sort of a new bank out in the US. So that worked. Ireland was a little bit difficult because you needed a sort of an EU director. Luckily on our board, we've got a EU resident that sort of worked in our favor there. But if we didn't have that, I think it would have caused quite a lot of problems opening up in Ireland. But other than that, we've been okay in terms of banks. We've just got too many, and there's a lot of logins and a lot of exposure in different currencies.
And John, I'm just seeing your answer. So China's a nightmare. USA difficult depending on the states, and yeah, and the prevalence of checks still.
Yeah, one of my most favorite things ever. I mean, you talking about the leader of the free world, and they're still using paper money. But yeah, I mean, I think I think Carl's really right on that particular. Is like one of the really big one of the really big challenges around the US is that the banking system generally is completely different to what we're familiar with in the UK. Essentially over here we've got about 5 or 6 choices if you want a red brick high street bank, and then you've got a handful of other choices if you want some of the neobanks. Over there, there can be 10 different banks, in every state, and depending on which city or town you're in as well, can be completely different. And so it's a real challenge. And as Carl alluded to, there are a bunch of well-known big profile names, but they quite often would take new business, unless you meet certain criteria. And that's a big old challenge. I think the challenge you generally find is as soon as you move into a profession where you don't speak the language, irrespective, people's barriers in the way anyway, because there can be challenges around just speaking the lingo, as it were, and dealing with whatever local requirements they may have.
Amazing. And then slightly different kind of perspective to this one, a question around, so we're talking here groups with some form of in-house kind of function, multi-entity, multi-territory, with FX exposure. So they have the need for what would conventionally be regarded, in like bigger corporate as a treasury function, but don't yet have the economies of scale to kind of justify that as a dedicated role. Would love to come to you first on this, John, and then, Carl and James, to bring you in. Like, where do I, as the kind of CFO of that business, go to get the relevant skills, both myself and my team?
That feels like a massive hospital pass, David. Thanks for that. I mean, where do you get the skills for managing sort of treasury? I mean,
Well, just like, what do your clients, your clients are in this situation. Like, what do they do? Because it's, we've all been there, right? Like, I've been, I'm a finance leader of multi-entity businesses where, 2/3 in the finance team, you kind of by definition generalist. What do you like? What's the sort of, what does best practice look like?
I mean, I think it's difficult to say what best practice looks like, because I think that would depend on the situation and the structure of the team. I mean, clearly, what you want to be able to do is you want to protect the company's assets, but without putting too many barriers in the way to make it impossible to spend money or to receive money, essentially, because then what's the point of being in business? But clearly, there's a challenge, and I think particularly when you start to put boots on the ground in a foreign country, that's when you need to really think about what do your approval processes for spend look like. James has alluded to, with Airwallex, you can have, spend cards and things like that. And I know within the product there, you can structure that so that it can be quite neatly managed. I think that's really important. I think you just need this sort of step back, and that sounds really easy to say, but I'm sure Carl will say, well, he only has like about 30 seconds in every waking hour to actually step back and think about things, and that is genuinely a challenge. I think for me the key one, particularly when you're dealing with FX, so particularly if you're managing it from the UK, is just understanding what your exposure looks like, and I guess the easiest way to do that is to try and present that in a way that you can see on a daily basis, so you're understanding where things are at. Because the worst thing you can do, I mean, it's a standard business policy, right? But the worst thing you can do is run out of money. And what you don't want to be in, you don't want a position where you open up in the States, you sign up to a lease, and then 6 weeks in, you've run out of cash in your dollar account and can't pay the rent. That's incredibly embarrassing, let alone challenging to overcome, because particularly in the States, the level of redress will be swift and you'll get kicked out. So just knowing where your cash is and what you need and stuff, and balancing that is a real challenge. And I think particularly if you're a startup, or you're moving into a new country where you've got to build a customer base and a revenue base, clearly in those early days you're not going to have a huge amount of cash coming inbound, so you're going to have to move cash from other places, whether it's from the UK or elsewhere, and again that comes with its own level of complications, risks, FX exposure, and let alone, again, Carl alluded to it, sometimes if you make a big payment, the bank will put it on stop because it's unusual and they're not sure what's going on.
Yeah, I can jump in here. I think sometimes it's just going back to basics and ensuring you maybe have 3 months OPEX in the different entities. And also be mindful of, if things do go wrong in terms of Silicon Valley as an example, you can get money out quickly. So ensuring that you don't have high level of funds in an overseas bank account that you can't get out in a matter of hours is probably really important nowadays, and having the diversity and the different spreading the money in different ways, which can lead to a headache because you're trying to keep track of where the funds are. I can add there as well.
I think Carl makes a really interesting point there as well, is actually we actually see this quite prevalently in charity groups in the UK, so not really sort of exposed to FX as such, but we see it in charity groups here in the UK where they want to make sure that their money's not at risk, and they're mindful of the FSCS protections, which means that if you've got money in a bank account in the UK, it's protected up to a certain limit should that bank go wrong. So the Silicon Valley thing is a classic example of that. And actually, because of the consolidation, particularly in the UK market, a lot of the banks are aligned under the same umbrella. So if you might have multiple accounts open, but actually only have one level of protection and not have multiple levels of protection. Of course, when you start to go overseas, you need to get your head across what kind of protections do you have for the money that you have. And even again, and I come back to the UK, and even in the UK, people think that if they've got an account open, that it's a bank account and it has the same protections. But actually, we have two levels of essentially bank accounts in the UK. We have proper bank accounts, which are regulated, and we have e-money accounts, which is what a lot of the newer fintechs in this space offer. And they have a different type of protection and regulation. And a lot of businesses don't actually understand the differences between those two and what that fundamentally means should there be a failure.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for that. I'm conscious of us coming up on time, and it's almost time to pull down the curtain on this webinar series. But to end, what I'd love to come to each of you with the question of is, what's your top tip for scaling as a group on Xero? And I'll come to James first, then John, and I'll finish with Carl.
Yeah, I think top tip when you're looking to expand internationally is to be able to pick a partner that's going to be able to support you for the whole journey. Quite often it may be this quarter it's the US, later in the year it might be Europe. Being able to actually select someone that's going to be able to support you through multiple regions, because ultimately you want to be able to consolidate and streamline global payments, not just on lots of different platforms that you sign up to in time, but being able to have one partner to support you with multiple options, I think is important.
Amazing. John, over to you.
I think my tip is just do it. I mean, just get on. No business should be held back from expanding into a new territory. And I think if you're worried about what your accounting system's going to do, it's probably the wrong thing to be worried about, because there's plenty of other things to worry about when it comes to your expansion. Having said that, get yourself familiar with the app ecosystem, and what's going on, because Xero is a great tool. The ecosystem is a great complementary set of tools that come with it and allows for expansion, for growth, and a whole bunch of other things. But also be aware of the limitations, I guess. That is fundamental too. And that'll just enable you to make an informed choice about what the right things to do are when it comes to managing growth.
Amazing. Thanks so much, John. And then Carl, bring us home.
I mean, echo similar to what the guys say in terms of, Xero does what it does. And there feels like no limit in terms of the number of entities in a group. I know the other day we had someone with 30 odd in the group, which is impressive. In terms of using Xero in terms of your growth, it works, it does what you need to do. And as sort of John alluded to, use the app and use your peers to keep up to date in terms of what's coming out, what's new, and what the changes are to help sort of keep your finance team in line and ensuring they're getting things cracked on and not sort of wasting dead time when they could be using the tech out there to speed up their day-to-day stuff.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thank you so much. And I'll permit myself to, to add a piece of advice to that, with this being the last webinar, is that please do get in touch with us at CFO Techstack and tell us, tell us what additional needs you have, what additional questions you have that we're not yet addressing. This is content and community for you. I'm so grateful to James, to John, to Carl for their support today, sharing their incredible insights. Hugely grateful to all of the speakers we've had across the webinar series, and to our fantastic team at Mayday and CFO Techstack for putting this together. It's a real thrill to deliver these resources for you to kind of meet your needs around, kind of what that awareness of what you can do with Xero plus its ecosystem. So yeah, tell us what more you need. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. There's an exclusive offer here from Airwallex, which will also be in the follow-up email with the recording. Thank you for joining us across this series. A massive thank you again to our panel, and look forward to seeing you at upcoming CFO Techstack events. And yeah, please do sign up to the newsletter and watch this space for news about Stacked. Thank you very much.